Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. As-salatu salam ala Rasulillahi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Inna Allah wa sunnatuhu wa shariatuhu khayran hakimiyya. Anjarama to my brothers and sisters in the Fula community. And I wanted to touch on a very important topic dealing with the Wagner group of Russia. Many have heard of them. And they are currently running roughshod through a number of African states. And as you see, I have been leading you up the last couple of weeks to talk about the Sahel, what's happening with my community, the Fula community, and what's happening with our African leaders, and what's going on inside the insurgencies and how they're being mishandled. And I covered last week showing you how they're developing initiatives in order to kill off the Fula community and also kill off to a great number the Afro-Tuareg and Afro-Arabs. So, well, let me give my proper presentation. Salamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh lil ikhwani wati fi din. Salamu ala mani taba huda lil ikhwani wati fi Africa wa Europa wa America wa Caribbean wa kuli makan. Halim wa salim bikum. Okay, my dear brothers and sisters, we have a serious issue here. A serious issue. You know, we have a colonization that has taken place before our eyes in modern time, and our African leaders know it and say nothing about it. The Western states are very wary of it, but say nothing. And I'll go to explain you why they're not saying anything. And I will show you, to give you a picture, why the Mujahideen groups that you see now, why they're being fought. Is because they're doing this so this new colonizer can eventually take over many African states. Once they take over, because the Wagner group are not acting on behalf of any government entity, even though we know they're aligned to the Russian government, but you know what has happened, they mutinied, but they're still independent of them, but yet they still are tied to them. And they are running roughshod through Africa right now. And the Western states can't do what it can do. And this is why they're sitting back watching. All the while, they're pushing African leaders to fight who poses the greatest danger to these new crusaders. That's the Fula Mujahideen, the Afro-Arab Mujahideen, the Afro-Tuareg Mujahideen. Now you understand what's going on, why they're being fought, and why they are pitting people together to fight so that way they can use them to fight to kill them off. And as they're killing them off, the Wagner group is coming in to take over. It's happening already, brother. We have one state now under their tutelage, under their colonization. That's the Central African Republic. You might not have heard about it because they're keeping it quiet, but the Muslims know about it. The Fulani know about it. They already, and they're in their way of making others as well, making other rounds. If you recall last time, brothers and sisters, weeks back, I did talk about the Russians. And okay, I don't see that's very funny. I don't see where the map is here of the Wagner, oh no, here it is, excuse me. Okay, this is in Arabic, but you can get the picture. I'll give you the English version in a minute. Here, the dots is the Wagner group. This is where they're presently at. If you look in the central at the map there, in Arabic there, you see Afrika Wasta. This is in Arabic meaning Central African Republic. This is where they took over. I won't get into that much because this is a complex issue because it does deal with the Fulani, but you have a lot of complexities that's going on in that particular country, and we can't talk about that within just 2 minutes. But I need to talk to you about the Wagner group, because it is very, very aggressive. And as you look at this map, you see here, you see you see Central African Republic, but then you see the Sahel right here. Now, the Wagner group is positioning itself very well. Right now, they're in Burkina Faso, they're in Mali. I explained to you a couple of weeks ago how they participated in about a year ago in the massacre of 500 Fulani men, women, and children. You remember I talked about that, and I showed you and gave you the proof of what happened, the testimony of the UN. I gave the testimony of our brothers and sisters who escaped this carnage. I gave you the evidence. Burkina Faso, they killed 300. Who was there? The Wagner group was also there in part to that. I'll get into their MO in another time when I cover Central African Republic. The reason why I'm talking about this now is because we're witnessing something in our era that we did not see. Our ancestors witnessed this 400 years ago when this colonization, this slavery and everything happened, because the Portuguese done similar things. If you know about the history of what happened in the transatlantic slave trade, the Portuguese had did similar things. And maybe you might not quite understand that. But the Wagner group right now, brothers and sisters, if you look at this map, they're setting up a wall. They're in Sudan. But are they going to be able to, if the RSF take over? No, I don't believe they'll be able to take over Sudan. But they'll have opportunity. They're in Libya. As you saw the map, they're in some parts of Algeria. They're making their rounds. But they're in the Sahel, and they're in the strategic area of Niger, Burkina Faso, you see there, and Mali. So this presents a clear and present danger to the African governments, and our African leaders are mute towards what's happening. They know what's going on, but they got their marching orders. Their marching orders is what? To fight against the Muslims, to fight against the Fulani. Because again, brothers and sisters, remember I've given you these history lessons. The three greatest of all jihad fighters in Africa come from three major groups. That's the Afro-Tuareg, the Afro-Arabs, and the Fulani. Okay, the Hausa also, because they are brothers, they are cousins there as well. And these groups pose a big threat to any colonization. This is why our leaders are in trouble, because they have marching orders to fight them. Once they try to stamp them out, the Wagner group will move more mercenaries. As we speak now, if you remember the what do you call them, the Burkas, remember of the Falkland Islands, where they fought with I think the British, they're wanting to join now with the Wagner group. We have other groups who have been, other mercenaries are now starting to join to get the war booty, so to speak, by coming in to join with the Wagner group. They're coming to Africa. As you heard me talk about last week, now it will start to come out. We have young, beautiful girls, especially Fulani girls. Okay. Now this is why the brothers here should be very upset, talking about this, because I don't see where I got that, but I don't have this here. I don't know where these there are. Why they should be upset is because we have many of them are now sporting mulatto babies. How do they get that? How did they get that, brothers and sisters? See, and they're doing this by force. So the importance now of us understanding what is happening before our eyes in modern era. Many of you say, I don't care. You should care, because as the African continent goes, so is your plight there in the Caribbean goes, or the Americas. We're all tied in. Since all three of these regions are very sick, you see, none of us are prospering. All of us are colonized. All of us are profiled. All of us are being controlled and ruled over. So we're very sick. So this is important. When we liberate one, the others will become liberated as well. If the African Americans somehow or another break through and begin to control the narrative there in the United States, this will help the Africans and the Caribbeans. No doubt about that. If Africa comes totally free with their own currency, one central government, currency, one language, and so forth and so on, the African Americans and the Caribbeans will be freed, and the South Americans, Central Americans as well. They'll be freed. So we're all tied in together, brothers. Never think that it's not the case. You are tied in to them. Now, our African leaders and their sheer hypocrisy, they're selling our minerals. How are they paying for these Tuba mercenaries? They're selling our minerals and our assets to the Wagner mercenaries so they can stay in power. They're trading our future so they can bring these Tuba mercenaries in to Africa to fight against black faces and kill them. No different than our ancestral leaders way back 400 years, 300 years ago. They did the same thing. They hired Portuguese and other Europeans to come into Africa, okay, to enslave in order to stay put. And they went and made excursions. They hired Africans to go make excursions inside Africa to bring out slaves and to fight their enemies. Our leaders are doing the same thing as they did, their ancestral leaders did way back. We have not stopped this scourge. They have, and now it's more sophisticated. It's more sophisticated now. See, so our leaders are motivated against the Fulani and quiet about Wagner. Why is that? You go through talk shows all through the Sahel, especially Nigeria. Oh boy, no, Nigeria is laden full of pundit shows talking about the Fulani, how they should be eliminated, how they should be this. And they stay quiet about just to the south of them, they have the Wagner group has already took over Central Republic, and they say nothing to that. See, so, and I'm alerting you to this. Yes, we can do nothing. We can do nothing, but you should be made aware, because this is important for you, brothers and sisters, that you understand what is happening before you. The scourge of the Europeans and the Tuba in Africa is still going on after 400 years. It's more sophisticated, as I said, but it's the same. Now we have a new group of ruthless. In the olden times, it was the Portuguese. The Portuguese were the brokers and the most cruelest of the slavers. They knew they had the insides, outs in the map. They've hired African leaders, hired them in order to stay in power 300 years ago. And then and they also went and enslaved their enemies. Our people are doing the same thing today. The Ghana, the cultivar, all of them, they are pitted because they told what to do. They give them millions and said, look, we want you to fight our enemies, which are, in the days in the past, the same thing, especially in the 1800s, the late 1700s and 1800s. Who were the enemy of the Portuguese, the Americans, all that at that time? The Muslims, because they had empires and they would not settle for them. So they fought them and they fought them and fought them. Now what has happened? In modern era, we have the same thing. The Wagner group is doing the same. They and their leaders, the Europeans that went to the African leaders to say, we'll give you these initiatives. We'll give you 30 million. We'll give you 40 million. We'll give you 50 million if you fight our enemies, the Fulani, the Afro-Arabs, the Afro-Tuareg. Okay, call them terrorists. You go fight them and then defeat them. And guess who would happen? Wagner turns it over. Let me explain something. I'll start to go on to this. You know how Wagner's doing this? Our leaders, our crooked leaders, give them power over our militaries. That's how they took over in Central African Republic. They went in with the military, they began to control it, and then the Wagner group used the military to do all these atrocities that we hear today, like in Mali, like in Burkina Faso. Who was behind it? Remember the faces I showed you? There was the white faces. And the UN know it, but they didn't want to say the Russians, but they quickly said in the next paragraph that the Russians were present, but they said they did not participate in all these massacres. But the villagers said, we saw the white faces there. See, so now you get this picture why they're being fought, why we're supposed to be angry with these people, okay, with our brothers. Yes, they've fallen into the trap because what has happened is they've had conflicts and they become brutal themselves. So they give impetus to be fought. But they were fought in the first place is because the Europeans, the Tubab forces wanted to clear them out. If you look at the history, what I'm talking about, brothers and sisters, you know, there's pundits on YouTube talk about slavery time. I've heard all kinds of things. They talk about all the slaves now are Hebrews and all that. Yes, maybe they were Hebrews, but most were Juju, Voodoo. They were other animists and so forth and so on. They weren't Christians. But the later period in the 1800s, the vast majority of slaves taken at that time were Muslims, because the Muslims were the last of the fighters against the Crusaders. This is why the percentage of Muslims skyrocketed to, they said, between the 40% to 50% of the slaves taken, period, were Muslims. Go back to your history. That's right. See, so now in modern era, we have the same thing. The Wagner cannot prosper until it conquers the Muslim populations, because the Muslim populations and their jihad is strong. And the Wagner group has said that. They talked about the Sahel region right now, especially the corridor of Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. Those Afro-Arabs, those Afro-Tuaregs, and the Fulani, they cannot defeat them. They know that. They said that. But they want black faces to go to fight them. See? So they're having a difficult time. They have an easier time going to the Central African Republic, but they have a dickens of a time in the Sahel, because these brothers there in the Sahel are rough, and they have been in jihad since the 700s. So this is a very interesting development, brothers and sisters. Okay, let me give my salam. Salam alaikum, my dear brother Ibrahim. And my brother, let me see who else we have here. Okay, yeah, my brother. Yes, Allah bless you with the good job. Thank you, my dear brother. And thank you for showing up. And yes, this is true. We have some serious problems, and we're going to have to face up to these problems. We're going to have to start turning our direction of hate towards Fulani people in particular. We start to put the hate to those who deserve it. That's our leaders and our politicians and these Tubab who are coming in the country to colonize. That's where our hate and our direction should be laid, not against people like me, the Fulani. And I'm going to give you something what was said. One wise, very wise Tubab historian is talking about this issue. He exposed it as well. See, so it's out there. Now we as Africans must redirect our hate, not towards the Fulani, not towards the Afro-Arabs and the Tuaregs, not against them. We should ask our leaders, what are you doing? Why are you taking this money to fight our brothers here when you say nothing against the Wagner mercenaries who are in the country? The French mercenaries are also here. We have the American Special Forces also here. All of them. Why aren't they talking against them? They don't. They only talk against black faces. This is maybe germane or not, but look at Tunisia. You've been following Tunisia? They're killing Africans as we speak now. They have towns now where they said they're African free. They drove Africans to the ocean. Our African leaders are quiet. The AU are quiet. Why is that? See, anybody who kills Africans, they stay quiet. See, that's funny, isn't it? And they're supposed to be gun-ho leaders. What about our Ghanaian president? Why? He talks good about all the stuff about this and that, but he stays quiet about Wagner. He stays quiet about what's going on in Tunisia. They're killing Africans there, driving them out of cities. You see, obviously exposing it. They're burning their houses. They're burning some of our African people alive. They're assassinating them. They're getting Africans in bunches and coming to them, stabbing them with knives and everything. This is going on in Tunisia as we speak right now. See, but when Africans erupt, then our leaders talk against them. See, and this stuff here has to stop, brothers and sisters. This stuff, we have to start to direct our anger towards our leaders and say, what are you doing? What are you doing about these mercenaries in our African lands now? And they're being paid with our wealth, our minerals, our diamonds, our bauxite. These mines are given to the Wagner group for payment. It's a shame. The Fulani herdsmen and the Messina group, plus the Afro-Arabs and the Tuaregs, have engaged these crusaders. Brothers, can you see what's going on now? Huh? Why they can't colonize the Sahel? Because they can't defeat these three groups here. That's right, brothers. They cannot defeat them. So they want the black faces to fight them, call them terrorists, so we can kill them. So that way Wagner can take over these areas and rule over our African leaders. What black man are these that we have today will allow a Tubob to come and rule over them and their people? They are turncoats. See, they're turncoats. And how is it after 400 years we still have the same thing? We can't put leaders. I'll take that back. We had leaders who didn't put up with that, and we know what happened. The Americans and the Europeans killed off our brightest leaders, and they're still doing that today. Some of our greatest leaders and so forth can't travel anymore. They're under house arrest. Many of them have been shot and killed. Many have been disappeared. Okay, we know that. So this is all by design, and that's why my program, I'm giving it so you can look at the alternative, what they're doing, why they're doing this to us. I'm giving it to you so you can understand that. See, so when you want to call your Fulani brother a terrorist, and you want to talk about the Afro-Arabs, but you should start talking about the Wagner group. You should start talking about these white mercenaries that are all over the place in Africa now, and ask our leaders, what are you doing? Stop concentrating on the Fulani, because they are the defense. Why? The Wagner group talked about this. Wagner group talking about how difficult it is to defeat them. They want the African governments to do more. Interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. Because you know, if Wagner declares they took over Mali, do you think those brothers there in Mali are going to stand for it? No, they will not. The Messina group and the Azawad group and the Ansar Deen, these are the Afro-Arabs and Afro-Tuareg and the Fulani. They ain't going to have none of that. Ain't going to have it. They're going to deal with them. And the Wagner group said it. Since they've been there for 2 years, they've made no headway against those three groups. Isn't that funny? They have not made a headway, even though the Americans there. The French are going in and out. The Germans are in there. The Belgians are in there. All these are in there to fight them. And they have not been able to do anything with them yet. Our leaders have the Accra initiative. I just got through talking about them. Member of the day. All this grandiose talking. They're there to kill other black folks, talk about terrorism, but they remain quiet. The American terror programs and training, they focus on the man with the beard. They got our black leaders focusing on people like me. I can't travel to most African states because of these terror programs, but the Wagner group can, and they're terrorists and they're mercenaries. These crusaders go in and out anywhere. Can I? No, I cannot. Why is that? How many people have I killed? None. How many terror groups, quote unquote, I have? None. How many Mujahideen soldiers do I have? None. How many times have I advocated to kill somebody? None. But I can't travel. Now, why is that? Why is that? And all this stuff here, the American terror programs, Africa, all of them ended together. You have the special intelligence groups backed up by the UN, to fight the Fulani. Remain quiet about the Wagner group. Interesting, isn't it? There's no such initiatives generated or funded by the aforementioned to defeat Wagner. Why is that? Our leaders in Nigeria and across the Sahel say nothing about the Wagner surge. And we believe the Wagner is in Nigeria as we speak, because I have a picture that some soldier was so upset But when he saw these white faces barking at orders, he took a hidden picture. He had his cell phone. He took the picture of the Tuba with the African security forces in Nigeria. See? And he exposed it. In the Sahel, the Wagner group was hired by 3 of the weakest states, as you heard me talk about, Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, to engage the Messina group, to engage the Fulani herdsmen against the Afro-Arabs and Tuaregs. Very interesting, isn't it? Very interesting. Yes, very interesting. The Wagner has no success in corralling these 3 groups. They don't have any. These groups vowed to engage the Tubab and stop them. Now, if you listen to the communiques of these 3 groups, they talk about the Tubab present, and they said they're fighting them. Now, they have switched this around and call this terrorism. But if they defeat these groups, brothers, you're going to have a new colonizer, and it's going to be rough in the Sahel, because you're going to have truly white faces governing you. And you're going to have mulatto babies running all over the place, because these white guys will be able to come in, these Tubab, and do what they want to do. And they'll run this country and your resources, and you remain poor. All your wealth, again, just like they did in slavery time, all the wealth in colonial period will leave out of here now unabated. They'll take all our diamonds, all our wealth. We'll be poor. We'll be slaved. This is what they want. So we have to, and the Mujahideen group said they're going to stop them in their tracks. Because why is it they understand what they're trying to do, and our African leaders claim they don't understand? See? So you say, why? 400 years of this Tuba crusaders have enslaved us. They have enslaved us. And okay, here we are. Here, yeah. Okay, they remain quiet about the Wagner. Okay, but now, and the Sahel group was okay, yeah. And the Wagner group has no success in crowning groups, as I heard you say. 400 years of these Tuba crusaders have enslaved and whatnot, and colonized. They have assassinated our brightest leaders, funded coups. The Americans are funding coups now to fight Muslims, and under the table train Africans to overthrow our governments. They create all this upheaval. And all this upheaval is what? The Tuba mercenaries are gaining ground inside. But in the northern tier, in the Sahel, they're not gaining, because they can't defeat these first line, these defenders here, these Mujahideen, who they're called terrorists. They can't defeat them. This is what's keeping the Sahel from the Tuba running over roughshod through the area and they control it, like they're doing in Central African Republic now. See, they won't be able to do it. They won't. Our leaders allowed the Tuba force to kill fellow disagreeable Africans because they want to stay in power. They want to get enriched. They hired the Tuba just like they did 200 years ago, 300 years ago, the same thing. They aligned themselves with them. And they did as they did in the transatlantic slave trade. In turn, they gave them modern weapons. What do they do today? They say, look, you a good nigga? Oh, excuse my French. I get flagged for that. If you a good Negro, okay, if you get a good Negro, we'll give you modern weapons. We'll give you airplanes. We'll give you helicopters. And our leaders say, yes, the boss, I'm doing that. And they give them modern weapons. And all the while, what are they doing? They're going after and killing and trafficking of our ladies and so forth out of the country. These weapons are designed to kill fellow Africans, not marauding Tuba crusaders. You see, the crusaders have the military in their pocket, but they don't have the Mujahideen. You get the picture now, brothers, what's going on? Huh? Do you guys get the picture? The Fula Mujahideen groups and the other groups are engaging these guys now and stopping them. They're fighting the military, who are armed with these Wagner and other mercenaries. They're fighting them, and they're fighting the hypocrites at the same time. And they know they don't want to see, as our ancestral Muslim empires in the 1800s knew the same things we're talking about now. They fought the colonials. They were the last defense before the colonials finally took over Africa as we understand it. The Muslim empires, the Emirates, were the last remaining foothold to fight the colonials. And it took them all the way to the 1900s before they actually colonized, especially West Africa in particular and North Africa, because they had to defeat all of these empires. I mean, these emirates. It was not easy. Now, fast forward to modern times, they're back at doing the same thing. They want to colonize it truly. But what has happened? The same Muslim groups who fought them in the 1800s, who fought them in the 1700s, is fighting them now. See? So, brothers and sisters, you should get a different picture now when instead of you hearing about terrorism, you should ask the question, why are they focusing on these three major groups? And why they got them pegged as terrorists? Why are they allowing the Crusaders to come into the country? You got to ask that. Thank you, my dear brother, Mamadou Ba. Thank you very much, my dear brother. Salam alaikum, Anjorama, to you. Thank you for showing up. So, brothers and sisters, I hope that you're starting to see the picture that I'm laying out for you today. I want to get into a topic here for us here about, now this is from a tuba, because I want people to, again, you got to remember something about the Muslims. You hear me talking about the tuba alike, a lot. You hear me talking about them a lot. But as a Muslim, when credit is due, we must give credit because we don't have racism. We talk about the tuba because they pose the greatest threat to our continent. Okay, and they still for 400 years. So I have to be against them because we have look at our continent, brothers and sisters. Have we prospered in it? No, we're still in the same sorry state. Who is the cause of that? The hypocrites who aid them and the tuba. They're still stealing our wealth. So I talk against it, but not every tuba is devilish. I've not said that. Here we have somebody who is actually, I don't know what his politics are, but he's explained what has happened very, very well. In here, he talks about, he says, to understand the African rulers, you see in the African rulers, you see in the mercenary group Wagner, its fighters can be deployed quickly. They're talking about the African leaders are in cahoots with Wagner right now. That's what he's talking about. He's exposing it. They're in cahoots with the Wagner group. Its fighters can be deployed quickly. They're using them because they can do things that they can't do. They want to kill the Fulani. They want to kill the Afro-Arabs straight out. And they're doing it in Mali. 400 here, 500 here, 300 here. And the Wagner group is helping them to do it. So he's exposing it. He says here, this is very interesting. He says here, the alternative sources of military muscle have flaws. He said, because the Africans know this, because the African leaders want to stay in power, brothers and sisters. They want to stay in power. So they tried to go to the UN. The UN mission, they say, lack robust and mandates. The African Union forces lack arms and motivation. Even though they got all this money from the IMF, I mean, what, 400, 500 million, they still have not armed their people because the money's been taken. It says there, the African leaders tried to go to the European Union. Our hypocrite leaders tried to go to the African Union to intervene for them. What kind of black man are these? Huh? Who are running our states now, our African states? What kind of black people are these? This is a white man. My dad used to tell me something many years ago, brothers. You listen to this reasoning, what he said to me. He was talking about the racism of the Tubab. He says when another Tubab comes to you who's been in the inner circle talking about the racism, about a whole bunch, a group here, he said, you listen to him because he's on the inner circle. And that reasoning, my dad, who's long past, he told me that. We have one of them here talking against them because he's in the inner circle. He's a Tubab. He's exposing the African leaders here. He said that African leaders tried to go to the African Union as to interveners. They can't because they don't want to touch the Fulani and the others like that, because to defeat the Fulani in particular is almost impossible task. Because you remember, brothers and sisters, we stretch, I mean, a great part of this continent. Okay, It's not going to be easy. And we have Mujahideen everywhere. So they realized they could not use them. So, and they said that they could not because our people, African people, look at their colonization and repression because we see the Europeans, we know them to be colonizers. Then here's what he said about the U.S., our African leaders, and trying to help under the table. He says that the African leaders talked about this. The U.S. has little interest in Africa beyond supporting fights against Salafist terrorists. Brothers and sisters, remember I've been talking about all of this for weeks, huh? Out here in Morocco, I step out of the house. Who is it? The Tubab goes after it. Does he go after the weak Muslims? No. The Muslims who drink and smoke? No. The Muslims who they say they're Muslim, but they're not Muslim? No. But they go after the people and the ulama like myself, the imams, strong. I mean, I'm talking about the strong ones. We have many scholars today that can't even leave their house because of the American program, and he's exposed it. He's a Tubab historian. He says here that the U.S. has little interest in Africa except fighting Muslims. And that's what they did. They went to all of the West African states and said, you fight the Muslims. You fight these Fulani. You fight these Tuareg and the Afro-Arabs. You fight them. They did it. And now they've weakened themselves so Wagner can do what we talked about. So now the Wagner can do this. See, as the Africans say, yes, sir, boss, to the Americans, these states here are starting to weaken to the point where Wagner now has a foothold in them. Brothers and sisters, do you guys see what is happening before your very eyes in modern times now? Why I'm talking about it? It may cost my life because they already had these Tubal already out here, these cowards, and I call them for they're bastards, what they do to Africans and what they're trying to do to me here as well. Because now I'm exposing them. And our African leaders are so weak that now Wagner are all in these areas of red. They've already colonized Central African Republic. They're close to maybe colonizing the Cameroons. They're in Nigeria as we speak. They're in Mali. They're in Burkina Faso. They're in Niger. They're operating. This map here is about approximately 3 years old. So I'm exposing this. I'm exposing this, brothers and sisters, because you African Americans, you Caribbean Africans, you may want to come here to live here one day. And one day you're going to find Tubab. You thought you're going to leave the hell that's over there, and suddenly you're going to walk down the street and you're going to see Tubabs like I start to see here now coming to fight you. They're going to have racial profiling. It's all coming because the Tubab is starting to control everything. So now, why I'm saying this now, you can start to pray against these guys. You can start arguing and going against these leaders. Now, what I mean by that, I'm Muslim. I'm talking about writing against them, exposing them. We're not talking about fighting and killing. As a Muslim, we have no authority. You already talked about the Sharia law. But I'm telling you now, you should do in your means. Okay, because we have rules in the Sunnah about what we can do with our hands. If we can't do anything with our hands, then we speak. If we can't do anything from speaking, we use our heart. Okay, we have those conditions. Here I'm speaking to give you these about the enemy, what they're doing. See, so this man explained it, that the U.S. is softening up the West African and the Sahel region. They're softening it up by telling the African leaders what? To go and fight against the Salafists. The Americans call us Salafist terrorists. This is a Tubab. His name is John Clark. So it's like a box. It reminds me of brothers and sisters. It's the same thing, like I use the analogy of boxing. You say you have one fighter. So they have one weak fighter that's over here, maybe sitting and waiting in the wings. So they bring the hardest hitting heavyweights to come fight this guy to soften him up. So when their man finally gets him, he's beaten to a pulp. He's bloody, he's sore, he's weak, he can't defeat. This is what the Americans are doing to us now. That's right. This is what they're doing to us right now. They're softening up the Sahel. They're softening up West Africa. So that way, one of them, the Wagner group, can take over. They're doing the same thing as that boxing analogy. They're fighting and fighting to the point where the Mujahideen are fighting the government, and then they're killing the government is killing them, and they're getting soft. Central African Republic has fell to the Wagner group already. See, they've already fell to them. They had the same formula. What happened in Central African Republic? I will get more into this in another day or so. The Central African Republic was in a hell of a campaign to fight against the Muslims. They got so weak that the Wagner group finally came in because the pieces, everybody was down. The Muslims were hurting because they had been decimated from fighting. The armed forces were weak, and the Wagner group came in and took over the damn country, brothers. They took it over. You see, this is what they're trying to do to the Sahel right now. They want the Mujahideen and the army and our black faces to stalemate each other to where we're so tired, the Wagner mercenaries and all the other ones come in and take over. Now you can see what they're trying to do. See, and I'm giving it to you, brothers and sisters. I'm giving this to you. These two-bop forces, and let's talk about this. These two-bop forces are not operating under any of God's law. Let's get that straight now. They're not using the Torah. They're not following Jesus, alayhi salatu salam. They're not following them. And surely they're not following subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Sharia Allah. So who can manufacture some of the devilish plans that we see today? I'm going to get into some of the things what the Wagner group are teaching our African security forces to do. It's devilish. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you look at all, I don't care if you take the Bible, you take the Old Testament, perhaps in the New Testament. Okay, you look at that. You look at Torah, you look at the Sharia law. There's no passages where Subhanahu wa ta'ala guides you or me or any Hebrew or Christian to do devilish machinations. He doesn't guide that. The devil does this. So when these groups here formulate these evil plans to take over the Sahel, to take over the African states, they use devilish machinations, pitting one group against the other. Subhanahu wa ta'ala is not advising them to do this. He's allowing it, yes, for a reason, but he's not putting these machinations in their head so they can kill us. This is from the devil. Who is the devil? Who is the greatest adversary to the devil? It's the Muslims. Because we're practicing Tawheed and we are fighting them to the teeth in our prayers because we pray more than anybody else. And we make the proper prostrations according to what Subhanahu wa ta'ala directed the prophets to do. All the prophets prostrated. That's right, my modern Christians, which you don't do, and the Hebrews, you don't prostrate. But all the prophets of old prostrated to Subhanahu wa ta'ala to show their obedience. See, so the devil's machinations are coming from the devil. It's not coming from Subhanahu wa ta'ala or Yahweh or any name you want. He doesn't guide you to do wrong. You won't find this in the Torah. You won't find this in the New Testament either. You won't find this in the Sharia law. See, so they have convinced our leaders and the African public that the insurgent Muslims are a threat. Threat to who? What happened in Central African Republic? They told the same thing. Who's running it now? Is it you? Is it me? Is it the Fulani? No, the Wagner group is running it after they had told the leaders there to fight the Muslims, to fight the Fulani and fight the Gula people. I won't get into all the stuff that's in Central African Republic because I'm going to get into it another day. But those people fought and they fought and they fought till they were all weakened. Now Central African Republic belongs to the Wagner group. Isn't that funny? They said that the greatest threat to their well-being is the Muslims and the Fulani. Who took it over? The Wagner group. What are these devilish machinations? Who are they telling the West African leaders to do now? Who's the greatest threat? The Fulani herdsmen, the Messina group, the Afro-Arabs, the Afro-Tuareg. The same thing they're telling the African leaders to fight them. They did this in Central African Republic to the whole country is weak. Maybe maybe a baby could walk in now control Central African Republic because all of the infrastructure is destroyed because of the fighting. The Wagner walked in, the military was weak, it took it over. And the president could say nothing because he has nothing left to fight because he's been ordered to fight the Muslims stalemated it. The north part of Central African Republic was stalemated. He had nothing left. He didn't have the weaponry to do anything. The leaders could do nothing. Wagner came in and took over the damn country. And now they're asking the Ghanaians to do the same thing. They're asking Nigerians to do the same thing. They're asking the Cote d'Ivoirians to do the same thing. They're asking our brothers in Guinea to do the same thing. They're asking our brothers in Senegal to do the same thing. They're asking our brothers in Morocco to do the same thing. In Algeria, and Libya and Egypt, they're asking all of them to fight against the fundamentalist Muslims, against whoever the threat is there. The Fulani is not the threat in the north, but in the Sahel, we know they are the biggest threat. In West Africa, they are the threat, according to them. So they ordered them to fight them. See, so you see these initiatives like this. How are our esteemed African presidents like this? They're smiling because they just got 40, 50, 60 million US dollars to fight their brothers so they can soften up the country so the Tubaab can come in and run their country. West African leaders are seeking solutions to curb terrorism. Who killed 400, 500? It's the Tubaab. They just killed in Mali. 300 in Burkina Faso, they directed the African troops who they supposed to be controlling. They're the G5 leaders, like our esteemed presidents here, supposed to be controlling these troops. And they're slaughtering the Fulani. And the Tubaab are with them. They're smiling. They're not saying nothing against them. Here, look at this. If this don't upset you, my dear brothers, I don't know what does. As I speak now, our African forces will be going to fight the Fulani. They're going to fight the Fulani. And who's in the background and who's running things? Is it you? Is it me? No, it's the Tubaab. You should redirect your anger instead of being angry at the Fulani and at the other Muslim groups. You should start to be mad at our African leaders for them to allow this to happen. Look at this. Here, the mercenaries here. This has nothing to do with color. This has nothing to do with color, brothers and sisters, because we have evilness on all sides. We have light-skinned brothers who are just as devilish as these guys. Here we have, again, the Tubaab training our African brothers to kill other blacks. And in time, if they prevail over the Fulani herdsmen and the Musini group against the Afro-Tuaregs and Arabs, this man here will be running the country, along with his governments will be really officially running the country. The Wagner will be running the country. This is their ambition. And this is why they're doing everything they can now to fight the Fulani and all of them, because their aspirations is to take over. Because why? We have so much mineral wealth, brothers and sisters. In the Sahel region, we have so much mineral wealth. The Russians know that. The French, why do you think the French, Russians, the Americans, the Chinese, everybody flocks there? Because of the mineral wealth, and it's enriching all of the Tubaab nations. It's enriching Russia. It's enriching China. But in order for them to take all of the mines, all of the bauxite and everything, they must defeat the Fulani. They must defeat the Fulani. They must drive them out, kill them off. I hope you get the picture, brothers and sisters, what is happening now. I hope you get the picture. See, Because here we are again. We have a parade here going on. Here is a Tubob. See, here's a Tubob right here. Here, our forces are getting ready to go out to fight the Fulani. And here is in the back, who will be barking out the orders to them, is this man. And they say he's Wagner. Some say they're special forces. I don't think they're. I think these are Wagner people. By looking at the insignias on the uniform and so forth and so on, these look like the Russian type, the type Tubobs. It look like the Russians. But here they're getting ready. They're showing a big parade here about they're getting ready to go fight the Fulani. So they're showing off the security forces. If you look to your left, there's another Tubob standing there. If this doesn't upset you, brothers and sisters, I don't know what does. You should be tired of this. Our ancestors fought this and they died for it. Our ancestors were enslaved fighting this. Other Mujahideen groups, the Samari Toure, okay, Mendinka, the Wasalu, remember the Emirate, they fought them for 20 years until they ran out and they were betrayed by other Africans. We have been fighting these people. We've always fought. We fought to get the hypocrite forces and against these colonizers, these crusaders. And this should upset you. You should not be happy to see this. Because look what these guys are doing. Now, brothers and sisters, look at our African leaders. We're in Africa. Why can't they wear dashiki? Why can't they wear agbada? Why do they have to look like pseudo-Europeans? See? Here we're in Africa. We're in Africa. Why they have to dress like the Tubob? We're in Africa. This is the Accra Initiative in Ghana. This is where this was held. Why do we have to dress like them? Because it shows the sheer hypocrisy of our African leaders. And you know what the Europeans, if you've been following the news, what the Europeans have been saying nasty things about the African leaders, especially the Ukraine and I think who else, Yugoslavia. They were talking about, the Polish. I forgot now. There've been almost every week new African heads of state, not the head of state, but their politicians talk against the African leaders. When the African leaders come in, they bust them. They put them in shitty hotels and in buses. When the American diplomatic corps, they drive in air-conditioned, warmed, bulletproof cars. Our African leaders are thrown into makeshift buses. You see, this is what they think about our people. This is what they think about our African leaders. Yeah, and my dear brother here said something here too. Yes, the hypocrisy, corruption need to stop. That's right. It needs to stop. And I'm exposing it. I can do nothing but expose this. That's all I can do to wake you up so you can start to get this understanding what is happening and why we should be arguing with our African leaders to get them to tell them to stop this stuff, to wake up and to start to protect our country, which you're not doing. And this thing here, brothers and sisters, is a big threat. You see those dots. This is the Wagner alone. Okay, they've already took over Central African Republic. This is dangerous. This is very dangerous. I'm going to finish the rest of this and I'll close this up. He talked about how the European groups, the Tubob groups, how they are settled to fight us in Africa. And our African leaders under the table working with them against us. Okay, our African leaders. And again, he made the point by saying that the U.S. has only one interest, is to clean out the Muslims because the Muslims and the jihad presents a clear and present danger to any Tubob aspirations in Africa. You start to look at this in a different aspect, brothers and sisters. It's not our military, it's not our politicians that they're scared of. They're scared of the Mujahideen. They're scared of them. When they see the Mujahideen groups Like I showed the pictures here yesterday. Boy, I can't. The other day here, was it the Messina? Where was that? I can't remember now where I have the Mujahideen group. I can't remember. But I want to show you this picture because I didn't get a chance to talk to this brother. This is an African sultan that ruled in Morocco. This is a picture drawn by the Portuguese. He's a half Fulani Amazigh mix. You can look at the man, you see. And this sultan fought against the Portuguese. I'm trying to make a point, brothers, to tell you that the Muslims have been the front line. I don't care how many Hebrews and Christians hate the Muslims. You can hate us, but you have to look at your history. We were the first line, we were the last line defense to protect the country. When we fell, finally Africa fell. And it didn't fall until all of the Islamic groups were taken. See, so I wanted to show you that because I wanted to talk to you about him the other day, but he's just one of them. My ancestors, the Sadiin, I have a picture of one of the older who fought the Portuguese. We have been fighting these guys for a long time. And now look at the modern times. It's Muslims who are the last defense for the new colonization that's want to be taking place in Africa now, especially West Africa and the Sahel region. See, so I'm hoping, brothers, that you guys will you start to see the things and see as it is, and now you can start to get the better picture. Who is actually the enemy? Is it you? Is it me? Or is it this guy over here to the left? The Wagner group, who are mercenaries, who are taking our mineral wealth as payment, who will run the country when the stalemate happens between the African governments and the Fulani groups and the Mujahideen groups. When they're tired, they can no longer fight anymore. This guy and his people will run the country. They will take over the military and it's over. And you'll start running just like they did in the Central African Republic. The Americans will be able to have a foothold. See, so you should rethink yourselves. You should rethink who is actually the greatest enemy to you. Is it me? Is it you? Look at here we go again. Here's two of these guys again, who fighting against who? The Muslims. They're fighting against the Muslims so that way they can weaken the country. So now, brothers and sisters, you should have enough to understand. You know, these invaders pushed ethnic strife. Who is it? The Wagner group pushed along the hypocrite leaders to have the Dogon and the Fulani to fight in Mali. The Dogon participated in the greatest massacre they've had in many hundreds of years, when they killed 500. And the Wagner group was actually backing them up. And it's proven by the UN report. See, so these Wagner people are no joke, brothers. They're no joke, okay? They're no joke, and you should take them seriously. I say this to you today because, as we say right now, if you may want to have aspirations coming from the United States into Africa, and you may want to think and say to yourself, you know, I'm tired of the Tubob over in the United States. You're going to come over here, and if the Muslims don't defeat these guys, you're going to be driving down the street, and these Tubob policemen will be running the police in these African states, and they'll start racial profiling you in Ghana or in Nigeria, and they'll use black faces also to profile you because they don't want us here. I'm talking about the Tubob, the Americans. They don't want us to come here, and they're going to try to drive us out. The AU remains passive. They know what's going on. They say nothing. The G5 and the coastal African states remain demure on them. As though they don't exist. Their Western handlers remain quiet, but the Pentagon released that map showing where the Wagner group is to explain the danger the Africans, but you know, we know what the Americans are, but they expose because they're enemies, because the Americans want to do what the Wagner group, they want to do what they they did, but they cannot, because they have a Congress will eat them up alive. So they kind of egg on the Wagner, who can go in and massacre hundreds and hundreds of people. The Americans can't do this anymore because they get caught. See, so the Western handlers who are handling our governments, see, remain quiet about, and they know what's going on. And they said, this brother here, this white guy here, he's not Muslim, but he's acting on the behalf of the Africans. So far as I'm concerned, he's in our brotherhood in a sense, because he's trying to protect us. And he's talking about the rebellion. Subhanahu wa ta'ala must have done something, because he put a rebellion inside Russia. Now the Wagner group is kind of like they don't know which way to play, because they're everywhere now. They're being stretched out thin. This is why they're trying to hire many more mercenaries to come in to work, because they're stretched out all across. They're in Ukraine, they're in Russia. Okay, they're over in we know they're here in Africa in many states. They don't have enough manpower, so they're looking for the manpower. And so this is a very telling situation, brothers and sisters. So and he talks here exposing the African Union. He says the utility certain regimes help explain the African Union's conspicuous silence, because on the menace that it posed, he's saying that they know it. They've been advised of the Wagner groups, what they're doing, their the barbarism that they've doing. They've been told, but they say the African Union remains quiet against them. They say he said, the African Union is passive towards Wagner, but they're not passive towards the Fulani. They're not. They'll get on the TV circuits and talk against the Fulani, but they won't talk against the Wagner. See, so, and they know the Russian imperialism is coming. They're not talking. They're not advising. So this is a serious issue. And he goes on to expose more of the Wagner misdeeds. And he said it's a serious, serious threat and he gives a list of things that they're doing, causing strife, so that way black folks can kill one another. He shows in Mozambique, because in Mozambique, they're fighting against the Mujahideen there. And the Wagner group was hired there. They're having a hard time fighting Al-Shabaab, because Al-Shabaab linked group is there in Mozambique. They can't take over Mozambique because the Mujahideen groups there, you want to call them terrorists, but they can't take it over because they can't defeat the group. They can't defeat the Mujahideen group that's there. See, so this is what I'm saying, brothers and sisters. This is a serious, serious talk. I'm talking now. It's a dangerous talk for me, but I'm exposing it because you should know what's going on and whatnot. And there's another article also by Al Jazeera exposing somewhat about the Russians and what they're using the Wagner group to soften up the African states, so they can come in to finally colonize that. And the Russian foreign minister Sergei Lavrov said that he told that the Africans are working in the CAR as instructors. They've already took over the country and will continue. He says here that the African states are inviting the Wagner group to fight there. They're not forcing. He says they're not forcing us to do it. He said the African governments are asking them to bring the Wagner group. See, our African government, our African leaders are asking them to do this. And so, and this is a very telling reports that happened. They said here that they were talking about the mercenary groups. Here he was talking about the mercenary group. Has been accused of human rights violations in many of the African states. And they said there's no questions here to whether the group should still be seen as a stabilizing threat. They are destabilizing threat as we see now, as I'm talking to you now. They said they are starting coups in many of the African states, which is true. See, so brothers and sisters, I give you this today, and this talk is a serious talk. And it's a deadly talk, and it's a one, especially for me in itself, because I'm exposing what is happening, so that way you can discern, so that we can have Africa in your prayers, that you can impress upon our African leaders, those who live on the continent. Don't fall for this trap that we see here. Don't fall for this trap, because they're falling for it. And these initiatives like this, don't support them. Remember, I told you it's a fraud. They're being paid off to fight the Fulani. They're being paid off to fight the Afro-Arabs and Tuareg, because Wagner said they can't defeat them in the Sahel. They can't defeat them. They need black faces to do it. And our African leaders are doing it for them. They're trying to defeat them. They're trying to defeat them so that way Wagner can take over. These are wicked African leaders that we have. Wicked. And they're being exposed. The Tubab is exposing them. See, we should be mad at our African leaders. And we should call them out every time we see them on there. We say, what are you doing about the Wagner group? When I start to see them now, I'm starting to write. When they're on their live programs, I start to write, ask questions. What are you doing about the Wagner threat? What they've done in Mali and Burkina Faso. What are you doing about that? Why are you fighting them when they're in the background trying to take over our countries? See, this is what I'm asking of them, because we should ask questions of our African leaders, because this is a serious business here, brothers and sisters. This is very serious, very, very serious. Okay, and I'm telling you right now, nobody wants to be colonized. We have enough problem as it is to have now two sets of leaders: hypocrite black leaders, and then we have hypocrite. We have crusaders, Tuba crusaders running our country. Both of them running countries, and you see what has happened. We live in a sorry state. We live in a sorry state right now in Africa. Is very, very, very dangerous, and we're suffering. And now we understand why. I gave you the picture today, brothers and sisters. I gave you the full reason why they're fighting the Fulani. Why are they fighting the Afro-Arabs and the Tuareg? See, now you understand what's happening behind it. They're trying to soften up the country so that way the Tuba can take over. Black folk killing black folk, like they did in the transatlantic slave trade. The Portuguese gave trinkets. They gave other things, booze and stuff to our African leaders, and they gave them other little weapons and so forth. And they let them, and finally they took over and even enslaved our African leaders, who were sent over to the Americas as well. And we have not learned our lessons. We have not learned our lessons, brothers. We're still depending on them. We're hiring them, and it's still an attempt to take over the country. And now they have the Mujahideen groups who are in jihad against them. So you should start looking at this in a different light. If those Mujahideen group falls, guess what's going to happen? Now, we're not talking about the AQ. We're not talking about the ISIS. They're not Mujahideen. No. We're not talking about them. We're talking about the rightful owners of the land, or the Afro-Arabs, the Afro-Tuareg, and the Fulani, and the Hausa, and so forth, Mandinka and Bambara. These are the true owners of the land, not the AQ and not the IS. You heard me say that. You heard me say this many times. I will emphasize this again. The AQ and IS have no business being here. It is not their land. It's our land. It's our people's. Okay, the Fulani, the Bambara, okay, the Mandinka, the Mende, and so forth, the Kampele, the Hausa, the Igbo, okay, all across the line, the Tiv, we go all across the line. This is our land. See, it's our land. We should be fighting for it to preserve it, not the AQ and IS. It's not their land. So who poses the biggest threat are the groups I just talked to you about. See, and those who fight Mujahideen pose the greatest threat to the Wagner group, and Wagner has said that. Why are African leaders? Anyway, I should leave it at that. I think I've talked enough today to make my point. But brothers and sisters, you listen to what the Wagner group says about the Sahel. They said they can't take out these guys, because once they take them out, the Sahel is finished. And the coastal West African states, in time will be finished as well. But it's not going to happen, brothers. You know why? Because the Prophet ﷺ gave us directions about the timeline, the end times. We start to see things happening. And Subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us in Surah 5, verse 54, he said that even those Muslims who turn their back, like the African leaders do, turn their back on the religion. He said, I will send forth others who will fight in my name. Yes, it's there in the Quran. Subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking about this time. He says in there, yes, you hypocrites, you turn your back on your religion, but you turn it. But I'm going to send forth others who will fight in jihad in my name. It's there. I've been trying to get other scholars to discuss this. Some can't because of their situation, but I want them to discuss this because I want to make sure that I'm right on this, because I see it in this fashion. They have made errors because no human being is perfect, but they're fighting in the name. We're not talking about AQ and IS. No, we're talking about the others are fighting. We're not talking about the bandits. We're talking about many of the herdsmen group who are protectors and Mujahideen and the Messina group and so forth and so on. These people here are fighting. They say fi sabilillah. So now you understand, brothers and sisters, what has happened in this scenario, and you should be alarmed. And now you should look at things a little differently. It's not your Fulani brother who is your greatest threat and enemy. It's not your Bambar brother either, or your Afro-Tuareg and Afro-Ara. The greatest threat to you now is the hypocrite leaders who are helping the Tuba to take over the countries. Those are our greatest threats because they're letting them take our wealth and everything. So my brothers and sisters, I will leave you with that. And thank you, my dear brothers, Ibrahim and Mamadou and others who will show up in the near future. I'm hoping that you will continue to support me, because I give you hard talks, maybe some too harsh for others. I understand that. Even if I only get one person who likes it, I'm happy and I'm satisfied. Those of you who like my talk, subscribe to me and pass the word so I can give another perspective, so you can look at things on the African continent a little differently than you do when you get it from from BBC and others like that. And now I'm exposing what our people are doing. So, okay, my dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum, rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.